Thank you for tuning in to Expectations of the Culture. My name is Essence and I am the host. You have decided to join us for episode 103 entitled It's Necessary. And tonight we will be discussing the effects of not getting treatment for yourselves and or others around you. I think all of my guests are special, but this one today, she truly is a special being. I met her about 2 to 3 weeks ago at a brunch for bosses, of course. We spoke with each other like we were sisters and we had known each other for years. So, of course, when I heard and learned what her purpose was, I just knew I had to have her on the show. I hate to use such cliche words like amazing to describe her, but she truly is amazing in her beliefs and values around what it is that she does. She carries herself with grace when educating the uneducated on her people. She is a very powerful woman who is an enrolled Shinnecock Indian Nation tribal member, and descendant of the Montauk tribe in Long Island, New York. She is also African American. Chenae Bullock, she's owner of Moskehtu Consulting, is an indigenous perspective historian, cultural practitioner, and preservationist. Please welcome Chenae Bullock.
Wow, thank you so much. That was so really that just like I had to put my head down for a second and just like wow. It's just
I work hard on my intros.
yeah, no, but I mean it was just everything you said, we hit it off. Like it was almost like we could have just sat there and talked for hours. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying? We learned so much about each other.
we
And for you
did.
to be able to put together such an introduction, it was like, when you first meet somebody, you never know what they think about you. You know what I'm saying? So I just want to say thank you for one, having me on the show and really seeing me that way. You know what I mean? And giving me my flowers now. I thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. I mean, I'm just so excited to even have this conversation with you because I felt like this might be so crazy to you, but I felt like expectations of the culture, what I thought it was going to be, became elevated after I spoke with you. And it was like my brain just blew up like, oh my God, you didn't even think about cultures across races and different groups of people and how they deal with it. I only thought about it from the perspective of being a Black woman. So I'm so happy to have met another strong Black, but also Native woman who, can give us really some good information on her community. So let's give me some information about your firm. Like, what is it that you do?
So I've worked in public history for about 15 years. Tell my age. For about 15 years, at different levels. But I never could really get into that executive administrative position because a lot of times when you work in public history as a native that the history is talking about, they don't really want you at the top. You know what I'm saying? so I worked in that field for a long time, and what I had discovered through my experience is that like a lot of historical or heritage or cultural consulting firms that were coming in as like subcontracting to these different organizations that I worked with, they were non-native, non just pretty much white firms
Mm-hmm.
who were experts in my culture through an institution. And here I am working in this space with the knowledge, not only academically, but in my life. And it was just kind of like passed aside as if it wasn't. It quite didn't fit the academic model or whatnot. So I didn't have a PhD. I was encouraged by a lot of my peers, especially natives, like Chenae, you need to get that PhD because it'll move you up, right? And you'll be looked at as an expert. And so I did. I mean, I tried. I did apply for a couple of fellowships and things like that. I didn't quite get it. But then I said, you know what? You don't need no PhD to own a business.
You do not.
You know what I'm saying? I've worked long enough. I've had a substantial amount of relationships. I've got a slew of certifications within cultural and heritage preservation. Um, I said, I'm going to launch the business. you know, so I launched it last year, 2019, officially launched it. So I had like, you know, between like almost 15 years to really get the experience, the field work, the understanding, the networking, the contacts, the credibility as a preservationist. And then really, I really got to spend time working in and out of corporate America to understand the structure of how I really wanted my business to be, like at a certain level, you know,
Right.
especially when you're dealing with culture and heritage preservation. I didn't really want it to just be this like educational service, like most of our, you know, communities are. I really want to get the bids, you know, and I probably am not only just the only female, but the only kind of business of color in those sectors, you know. So there's a standard that I worked really hard for. So Moskehtu Consulting, what we do is we do anything from curriculum development into institutions. I've worked with Tribeca Film Institute and helping to develop curriculums for some of the films that they produce in the school system of New York. I've actually, you know, so we also do archaeological excavation surveys. So we also do anything from just genealogy consulting. We do mediation between tribal governments and non-tribal governments. You know, we do quite a bit of work. And I think this year it's really been taken off, especially with our diversity and inclusion, cultural competency, and cultural sensitivity training and development and content is something that we've been delivering a lot to some of our clients. Even record labels sometimes reach out to us on helping with, you know, cultural consulting, you know, because sometimes you have artists who might really want to learn more of the culture so that they're not appropriating it. And that's a passion of mine. You know, I recognize that as leadership in the entertainment industry. You know, I recognize that as leadership, that they are saying, you know what, we want to learn and we want to come and we want to do it in the right way. And so, so there's a whole lot of things I can do, but that's what Moskehtu Consulting is. Moskehtu means medicine in my traditional Shinnecock language. Moskehtu is medicine.
Yes, yes. Moskehtu. So happy I said it properly. Thank you for teaching it to me. Question has nothing to do with mental health, of course, but what is the representation like for you? Like, I know you're saying you guys are working on like the diversity and inclusion and making sure that, you know, companies, entertainment companies and things like that are not appropriating your culture, but are there people, like when you're in this sector, are you underrepresented? Do you see other people like yourself doing the same thing, or?
Oh, of course, we're definitely underrepresented. I mean, shoot, we're under, ain't even a word sometimes. I'll give you a prime example. We're so underrepresented that when we're in the space, even though I might be there and maybe my peer or partner might be there in the space full of people, it's being discussed as if we aren't there. Not quite intentionally, right? But because there's not enough representation or no representation at all, it's not even a thought that, oh, I didn't even, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. You know what I'm saying? Example, I actually had given my consultant firm actually partnered with the Shinnecock Environmental Department, which is, so on the East Coast, there's a huge talk about climate change and how we're losing our shoreline. Our tribe has created, or our environmental department has created an amazing climate adaptation plan. So scientists throughout the world have actually seen this plan, and they are utilizing our plan as a model for many different coastal areas around the world in the country. So they reached out to our environmental department director and myself and wanted us to give a presentation at Columbia Law School for a huge climate change conference that they had a year ago. So we were keynote speakers along with probably 5 other keynote speakers. And as we're on the panel, there was talk about what they call, the scientists call it, and policymakers call it, like not rezoning, but relocating. That's what that's the term for coastal communities. What is the relocation plan? You know, because what's going to happen?
Right.
Inland, right? So,
right.
so, so they had went to say that, scientists are working on it, policymakers are working on these plans, right? And it's a plan for us, but we're not a part of the conversation of planning. So I had to speak up and I said, whoa, when I hear we are planning and we, I hear y'all. And I also see the same thing that happened in the Trail of Tears. There was a plan that y'all had, and it was to remove us without us having to say on where we're supposed to be at. So we're not going to do the same thing again in 2025.
Yeah.
Or 2030. So what is it like being in the room? You got to speak up as a business owner, as an ambassador for your people. And it's your inherent obligation to do so, because if you don't, you're continuously aiding to the genocide, like the paper genocide or the non-existence of your people by not saying anything. So it gets tough, but you've got to be, and to do it in the most respectful way, that you can, so that you're educating everyone that's listening to you, and especially the person that made that mistake, yeah.
And that was one thing that really attracted me to you, was I felt like when we kind of went around the room, everybody said, okay, yeah, this is what I do. But I felt like when it was your turn, it was like, all right, I have 60 seconds to educate these people. And I felt immediately like educated. Like, I have to talk to this girl and find out what the heck is she doing? What is this lady doing? Because she sounds so smart and amazing. Like, what is going on? So with that being said, of course, when we were there, it was Halloween. So you made a comment about children and adults wearing Pocahontas costumes. Now, I know that might seem a little off the topic again about mental illness, as far as, this being an awareness podcast, but I feel it necessary that people understand why that choice of a costume is offensive to your community. Do you mind sharing your explanation behind this?
Sure. Actually, I think the whole topic of that is really mental illness. Like, if you really look at it, because like in a nutshell, like, it bothers someone so much that they no longer want to partake in their culture. It bothers a people so much that their kids have the highest rate of suicide in the country, Indigenous students. It bothers a people so much that they leave their culture and are exposed through exploitation in the rest of the country. It bothers people so much that they drop out of high school at a higher rate than anybody else in the country. It bothers us so much that we even have another stereotype that we're drunks because of alcoholism, and drug and substance abuse. That's how much something like, oh, it's just a costume, bothers a people. So it really does, at the underlying part, right? At the end of the day, because we could say it's principle, we can say it's history, we can just say it's wrong, but the effects that it really has, the statistics show the increase of not only mental illness, but real sickness. Because if you have mental illness so long, you become sick, like physically actually sick, turns into cancer, and it spreads through a whole community. So yeah, not only just Pocahontas, but any costume, and it's actually really gotten to the point where there's a lot of things going viral right now over a couple of different well-known influencers that have taken it upon themselves to wear a costume, and that's what it's called, a costume, and they're depicting a character. Let's talk about Pocahontas. Pocahontas, unfortunately, was a product of sex trafficking, period. human trafficking. She's a young girl, and she's written about, but people that hear about the story never actually really read the firsthand accounts from John Smith. John Smith was so famous because he had kind of the most preserved documents that you can read about the New World. There's others, but he had very descriptive diaries, you know, and his thoughts and how he's feeling as a grown man on a 12-year-old of innocence who comes from the earth, as most earth as you can get in the 1600s. A woman of color is now probably one of the highest priced costumes in companies. You know what I'm saying? So if you really think about it that deep, yeah, it affects our mental health to the point where like we can't even say anything without getting into an argument. And now it's like, you know, because we have literally the highest statistics show there's the highest rate of women going missing and murdered in the indigenous country. In Manitoba, Canada, in one day, in one city, I don't know if it's a city or a county, it doesn't even matter, 150 calls for missing Native women per day in one city. Yes, 150. This is not a lie. This is not a lie. And it's one city, one day for one kind of people. That's one city.
Wow.
So, you know, like, so we see these Pocahontas things, and then this is still happening to our people, and we're speaking out, and we can't. So, of course, you're not going to have everybody that's going to be right with themselves, and, you know, because there's other internal things, right? There's things that's happening in the home, and just all these kind of things that, you know, you got to pick and choose which battle you decide to deal with today.
Yes.
Or let alone all of them just being in denial about it. But then you have a couple of us that's out there like, come on, man, this is wrong. Now, what does that do to my mental? You know, so there's that whole Halloween costume thing. It's because it has never stopped. They've been doing it. And think about it. If you're in a classroom and you're 7 years old and you've been raised in a traditional community, or you're 15 years old and you live in a traditional community and you go into a school, it's Halloween, and your teacher and your principal is dressed up like Pocahontas, what is that doing to our kids?
Right.
You know, so when you become an adult, it don't change. It happens in the workplace. It's not really going to be until others start saying that it's wrong and do something about it.
And how would you say, or like maybe give a couple of pointers on, you know, being sensitive around that and being considerate so that you aren't alienating someone and making them feel like, you know, they're just a big joke, I guess.
Right. Like a joke, a novelty. So right, I love how you said sensitive, right? Because that's what we have is cultural sensitivity. Training with Moskehtu Consulting, or even just consulting around cultural sensitivity. Because there's cultural sensitivity, and that starts with knowing what your biases are as a human. We all have biases. We all have them. Harvard had a study, I think it was back in 2017 or 2016. There was a study that actually they had, and we put that exhibit into the Mashantucket Pequot Museum because we wanted people to actually take this implicit bias test so they can learn what are my biases. Of course, we're all going to say, no, I'm fine. I'm for everybody and like whatever, what have you. But it's not until you learn what your biases are that you become conscious what it could feel like for someone else.
Right.
You know, like I worked for a German company, and there is a certain culture that Germans have. And if it's a German company, there's a culture of the company on how they communicate, how they do business, all of that. And so they had amazing German cultural classes that it was mandatory for us to take. And in the class, you're going to have an array of people, but the leader of the class, he would kind of help us understand what our biases are coming in before he broke down what the culture is. Then you can become culturally competent of someone else's culture. So I think, it's important for people to check themselves at the door first.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't do that.
No, they don't. And, fortunately for me, I work with a firm. I support a firm called Pink Consulting, and what she does is diversity and inclusion from, the area of where she is. And I learned quite a bit about, how to be sensitive, how to ask questions, you know what I mean? Like she taught me a lot about that. Like, that's why when I ask you and I speak to you, is this appropriate for me to say, your people versus your community? And, I don't want to say anything that's going to be offensive just because I'm not educated on it. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I definitely want to say to people, if you have questions, ask. Ask. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to Google stuff.
Right.
She has a website. I would give you her website towards the end of this, and it will also be in the notes of the video. But yeah, I mean, definitely I recommend getting cultural training if you can. And it really needs to be a requirement across the board.
Right. But it's for itself too. That's another thing too. I think, unfortunately, as any Indigenous person from anywhere in the world, we have been systematically, strategically removed from our culture. All of us, like as all of us, unfortunately. And the ones that are like in the Amazons that are still left, look what's happening to them. They're being exploited. Like, that's the time we're in. So I think also what people have to do is really look inside themselves to learn about themselves.
Yes.
And see what's unique about their culture and where does it tie into the rest of the diaspora of Indigenous peoples. Where? Because we're not a monolithic people. We don't all do everything the same.
Right.
We didn't believe everything was the same. We have commonalities because we are people of the land and people of the water. Right. And so it's like that's going to always connect us. But we all have different culture. We have cultural differences because we come from different parts of that land and water. Right. And we want to know what are each other's. But if you can't go back and forth because you don't have anything to give, then that's where we're actually at now. But that's where we should start. What is it? Find out, because people are so curious to know about everybody else. I love when I seen the expectations of the culture. That's what I was thinking, like culture, right? And that word is used a lot within these last 2 years.
It is.
But then it's like, where are the customs and the protocols of the culture? What are your customs and protocols? What's your heritage? There's culture, you have corporate culture, right? Like, so when I hear expectations of the culture, I think all of us should understand what our
culture is.
Yeah. Absolutely. Then we know what our expectations of the culture is. But you can't say what someone else is.
Right.
But we meet each other where we're at,
And a lot of us don't even know our backgrounds, where we come from, where our people come from. I mean, we know the basics, you know what I mean? But to actually sit down and say, hey, let me just do some research, because I had mentioned some things about, my family and things like that. And I reached out to my mom. She was like, nope, I don't know. I'm like, wow, really? Yeah. So we need to figure this out, you know what I mean? So I think that's going to be one of my projects. Like, after talking to you, I was like, I really do need to understand who I am. That way I can teach my children who they are. You know what I mean? And the lack of education can end now instead of continuing to go this way. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I definitely agree. If you don't know your people, your community, where you're from, please take out the time to get to know who you are.
Because knowledge of self is power. So when we talk about mental, right? When I get down to my lowest, because I ain't perfect, and I go low sometimes. I have historical trauma, I have insidious trauma.
Right.
There's different strands through my DNA that have experienced things that we couldn't even imagine, right? So there are things that like my blood remembers when I come into contact with something that moves that nerve.
Mm-hmm.
It happens with all of us.
Right. Absolutely.
You're like, oh, I know what that is. You know what I'm saying? Then you're gonna deal with it later on, like, oh my God, I just need to sit down. Right. But when you really get to when you know who you are though, then that really is such Moskehtu. It's such medicine to your mental health. My teachers told me that. They were like, Chenae, like when I was younger and I was coming into, who I am now. They used to tell me that when I was like just young adolescent. They used to say, Chenae, remember who you are. It was almost like one of those like Mufasa movies, or like, I really had teachers like that. They were like, Chenae, remember who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time I was learning who I was. I mean, I always knew what line I came from. And I just didn't know, like, no, you have a legacy that you actually have to carry. Yeah, you knew your ancestors were whalers. You knew that they were Kwashalam, we Tomo and Mangatuxi. And, you come from all those people. I knew that growing up. Mm-hmm. But when you know who you are, though, then it's like, okay, I'm going to take this on differently now. Mm-hmm. Especially with the mental, because, you have that self-preservation. You know what I mean? I have right by my bed, I have what do they call affirmations? My affirmations is my genealogy. These hand poke tattoos. They represent every line in my family that goes back to all of the sachems and the chiefs. This is a constant reminder that what I do comes from a long line of leadership. And so that's my affirmations. I can't say that was going to work for everybody. And it's really hard because the paper genocide of our people, you look at it, everybody wants to go the genealogical route, but your ancestors will show you that not everything was on paper. So you could physically go to a place or get near a place or get near a people, and you're going to be taught some things about yourself that you're not going to find on Ancestry.com. You're not going to find from no daggone DNA lab. Mm-hmm. And then when you start to get closer to that part of yourself, mm-hmm. that helps so much. Like I have to tell you, because that's what pulled me through my mental illness and issues, was that part. Mm-hmm. Really understanding that.
Yeah. Well, I definitely need to work with you and figure out how I can figure out who the heck I am. You know what I mean? I would really like to know, especially my mom, because I think she has some interesting things going down the line with her there. So, but we'll talk about that off air. So due to COVID, I cannot hit the streets and ask questions. So
that's cool.
So definitely give them your handle for me on Instagram. I want to make sure I don't want to mispronounce it.
So it's Netooey Usqua. That's NETOOEUSQAU. Netooey Usqua. It means butterfly woman.
Oh, that's right. You did say that at the brunch. Okay, perfect. So again, her details will be in the notes of this video. Also on the notes or whatever notes you need regarding the podcast. So all of that will be there. But she asked me to research the Indigenous Peoples Movement Instagram page. And so of course I was so excited to have found a post about mental illness. So I just wanted to read that post to you. There were some really great responses to that post that I wanted to get some feedback on you about, okay? So the post stated, did you know over 21% of Native Americans have a diagnosable mental illness, but only 10% of those experiencing issues will seek treatment? So here was one of the posts under that. It stated, we needed a place of healing on each reservation. cultural practices like the sweat lodge could easily help a lot of our people. I was like, sweat lodge. Let me see what is that about? What is the sweat lodge? Is that something that you're aware of?
Oh yeah, definitely. So like I said, cultural practices so that's an example of, right? So we have many different, every community has a very different type of ceremony sometimes because of where they're located. Today, as we've gotten past like all the different wars and tribes have just kind of like intermarried and things, we have a lot of shared ceremonies.
Okay.
So the sweat lodge is something that a lot of Native people practice, or they call it inipi. The Lakota, they call it the inipi. And basically, it is a cleansing ceremony. So, there's different medicines that are involved, and, different people have different teachings on what's utilized in the ceremonies and who's to go in those ceremonies and what time you go in those ceremonies and when you're not supposed to go to those ceremonies. But it's very, very, very sacred, and it's very ancient. But it is to remove all the impurities from your being.
Interesting.
So when we say Moskehtu, it's in a circle, and you have the east, you have the south, you have the west, and you have the north. So there's different phases in your life. There's the birth, adolescence, adult, and elderly. So it's a circle. And so you have the red, you have the yellow, the red, the black, and the white. And so in our ceremonies, there's a teaching around what we call that medicine wheel that's in those type of ceremonies. So depending on which direction you come from, you coming with a different energy, and a different aura. But with what's happening today, just like that, the statistics are saying, the reason why people may not seek it in that way is because they're seeking it in our cultural ways. This is why they said that if more of our people, use cultural practices and traditional ceremonies like the sweat lodge, then those statistics would be different. And this is true. This is very true.
And so let me ask you a question though. Are these just traditional as far as the cultural practices are they in place for tradition, or are they in place because access to healthcare is not where it should be? Like,
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that historically, healthcare for Native people has been wrong from the jump. It's not really until we have our own people that have become doctors and practitioners and policymakers, senators and congresswomen now, that they really cannot not only influence policy, but now they can begin to create policy. And it's going to take a while for that healthcare system to change, for our people to see the impact that it's making. Because historically, I mean, there's that whole, they came over here and they had smallpox and all this kind of stuff, right? And then they had welfare centers that we all had to go and get rations, and we were becoming sick off of whatever they're giving us. So the healthcare system, when it comes to Native people, we don't have trust in it as a whole. Not saying that there aren't good people within that system, right? I'm not saying that. I'm not that radical. You know what I'm saying? But I will say that there's a transformation. I have friends. My best friend's mother, actually, Cheryl Fry. She actually was a councilwoman for the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, which is the federally recognized tribe in Massachusetts. And she helped she sat on their health committee, but she also sat on what is called IHS, the National Board for Indian Health Services. So, I mean, that's within the recent years. So it's going to take time for these policies that are being developed and created to be funneled down
Right.
into the community.
Right.
But as much as they might be funneling down, it's going to take time for our people to trust it.
Correct.
So they would rather go to the ceremonial stuff.
Right. And then seek what we consider to be just medical attention. They rather do it.
Yeah, I mean, it ain't even, yeah, and it's not even just the Native people. I mean, look what's been happening within our Black communities through the CDC,
That's
through
true.
the flu shot,
That's true.
you know, through the Tuskegee experiment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these are not things that just happen. I mean, there was a huge, during the early 2000s, in the 90s, there was sterilization happening within Native communities. They were sterilizing women without consent. So basically, you know, there's going to be, you know, to that comment, or just like what you were saying, there's definitely a resistance in, you know, believing in anything that the government
Right.
is going to issue to our community. But
Right.
there's also enough of our, not, I don't want to say enough, but there's more of our people that are really, really entering in that sector to change these policies and to change, you know, the system. But it's going to just take some time for our people to quite, you know,
Right.
to understand that.
Well, hopefully change will come sooner than later. You know, it's just very unfortunate, especially when you're dealing with something like mental illness. I mean, I couldn't imagine. I've had moments where I did not have access to healthcare like I needed to. And I mean, you know, I deal with my own case of, I suffer from bipolar 1 disorder. So, for me, it's the mania. My brain doesn't shut down. So, like, not having access to healthcare means I don't sleep.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I can't imagine that, to not really have the type of access to healthcare that you need. And I know you had mentioned as far as like the education around mental health. Did you want to speak on that? And
yeah, so one of my best friends, actually, he just got his PhD last year in functional medicine, functional health. And we joke around because I'm like, oh, now you're actually legally a medicine man. I think it's funny because we were raised traditionally, and we learned things through the culture. But one of the things that he's been working on is really traveling to indigenous communities and teaching them about their environment and how that can actually aid in the health. You know what I'm saying? Because some communities, not all Native American tribes have access to resources, because if you're not federally recognized and you're not state recognized, you're only deemed as historically recognized, you're not getting federal dollars. Some tribes that are state have to compete with monies that's allocated in the state. They have to compete with other tribes in the state for those dollars, you know, to service their entire community. And that's just through healthcare. We're not talking about education. We're not talking about, you know, all these other different areas, natural resources, environmental. There's other components.
right.
Also, I mean, because we're governments. So, you know, I have many of close relatives that are from tribes that are what they call historically recognized. Like the state doesn't even, they talk about as a has-been, as a past tense, but they're still existing in the state as a community, so they get no resources, right? So those communities, we're talking about COVID at this point. So you have people who have underlying health disparities or health issues, and because they can't get resources for chronic pain or something like that, it causes mental health issues.
Absolutely.
So it's like not only just the mental, so it's like a whole, like, just rabbit hole.
Right.
You know, so one of the things that I've been, you know, communicating with my friend is how, you know, through epigenetics, the study of epigenetics, the study pretty much like understanding the environment and how that could either harm you and make your matters worse.
Mm-hmm.
It could literally just be like the structure of a building.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are certain structures in a building that don't sit well with our spirit. It's not round. It's not nature. The colors, you know, it actually makes things worse.
Mm.
And this has been studied. You know, there's programming that we are institutionalized and we're polarized through certain types of programming that it's actually harming us even worse. But when you put yourself in a very natural state with flower essences, very natural colors, earth colors, bringing yourself out of an environment and putting yourself into a healthier environment, whether you have access to federal dollars for healthcare or state dollars or whatever it is, you can actually begin to see, if tested, your cells heal themselves. Mm-hmm. This is proven, you know. I'm like realizing I'm saying all this on the podcast.
It's okay. I love it. Exclusive. Yes, I take all of that. Thank you, darling. Keep it going. We're listening. Listen, I mean, for me, it's about the education. You know what I mean? It's all about that. And these are things, sometimes it's good to have some inside scoops, you know? So this is the inside scoop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's definitely, I'm just happy to have this opportunity with you to even be able to educate people on just a few items, like even just the few things that you're bringing up to me is just like, wow. And I would have never known if I didn't meet you that day.
I know.
Learned this stuff. Next to me, right?
Literally, like it wasn't like we had to go across the room.
Like just telling her, hey girl, how you doing? Let's talk.
All those COVID, we weren't literally sitting right beside each other.
And it was distance.
Yeah.
Okay, relax.
But no one was between.
Please, no COVID comments. Thank you. I did have another one.
Yes.
That I wanted to share with you. It said, I sought help once, but most psychiatrists wanted to infuse me with mind-altering drugs that make anyone worse off than they really are. And we have Christians who never leave us be to peacefully seek a better way with our Creator and more peaceful and understanding ways with life in general. So no, traditional spirit systems work just fine for us, troubled ones, so-called.
That was pretty well written. That was very eloquent there. Yeah, I've actually had to sit twice, and I had that same experience. I feel, so for example, in IHS centers, Indian Health Services centers, and so every federally recognized tribe has access to IHS. Now, how their IHS is set up is going to be different. The Indian Health Services, that is pretty much through the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which is a federal agency. There's a center, a health services center. Some tribes have money, they have hospitals. Some just have like a little clinic. Some have dentists, but they usually have some kind of mental health person. Mm-hmm. So I've been to, I sat and I had that experience, and it was like they really wanted to know more about the tribe. Mm-hmm. They really wanted to know more. I didn't really feel like they were getting to try to help me with anything that was going on with me. Wow. It was more so like they were almost like sent there to have reports, mm-hmm. and to put as many of us as they can on drugs. So we have a lot of overdoses. When I said that Native American teenagers have the highest rate of teen suicide in the country, that statistic has not changed since early 2000s. It is still the same today. Now, how do you think they're overdosing? I mean, how do you think they're doing suicides? They're overdosing because they're just pushing these drugs out the IHS centers. Period.
No education on how to use them. No education on what they're feeling. No education on their diagnosis. Just
I mean, I can't say that as a general statement, right? Because that could be, it could be. I'm not gonna say any tribe's name, but it could be like this community has like really great, amazing, and a lot of times that's that way because their tribal members are very hands-on that program. Period.
Okay.
That's usually how it is.
Yeah.
If you don't have tribal members that are not hands-on, it's like you're allowing this agency to come in. And these jobs are available to anybody. I mean, you can go on usajobs.com and type in Native American reservations. The number one type of job is healthcare centers.
Really?
Yeah, USA. Yeah. You can be anybody to come on there and work. So I think what this person is saying is like, yeah. And between functional, holistic versus these pharmaceutical, there's always been this war. This war on drugs, always been that, right? A lot of tribes going into this cannabis sector. Our tribe being one of them. I'm actually the managing director of our cannabis dispensary and wellness center, cannabis business, Little Beach Harvest. That's the area that tribes are really pushing really hard to move into, because the opium epidemic that's happening, it's out the roof. You know, you have a tribe losing people by overdose,
right?
But you know, you can easily just go into the clinic there and get the drugs like it's nothing. It's like they're not saying no, you can't have any more.
Right. And it's interesting because I'm actually going to do an episode on coping skills, and I want to have a guest around cannabis and how it does help with mental illness. And a lot of people can probably be removed from some of these pharmaceutical drugs if we just use what comes out of the earth. You know what I mean? Like there's a reason why it was provided. You know what I mean? It's from criminalizing it and government listen, we're not going to get into all that. But anyway, listen, I do have an episode coming up around coping with mental illness, and I will be speaking to an expert on marijuana.
Oh, that's awesome.
Cannabis and how that assists people with their mental illness, especially anxiety.
Oh yeah, I mean that's like the number one topic of the year, especially. I mean, you're seeing, I'm sure doctors, if we were to look at the data between just last year, the end of last year alone, and where we're at literally like this month, the graph is like off the charts.
Absolutely.
Probably, you know, but it's the plant life. I mean, people talk about lavender, they talk about jasmine, flower essences. I mean, they even say, I mean, we learn this about children, right? The best way for them to learn coping mechanisms is to play outside, to be outside. Because not only just being outside, I mean, the smell of pine, the breeze, the sounds of water, you know, just all of these different natural things. It's medicine to your mind, your body, your spirit, and your physical. And the more and more, and like we seen it earlier on in the pandemic, people were taken to the parks like it was nothing, you know, and people were actually starting to cope with the pandemic in a better way.
In a better way, yes. We're finding more holistic ways to deal with it. Like yesterday, I had a little bit of anxiety. I can't really remember what it was around, but I was at the grocery store and I just picked up a whole bunch of flowers. I said, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna make me a floral arrangement. And, you know, when I see it, it just like brightens my mood. And it's because it allowed me to be creative, but at the same time, I could smell it and it looks pretty. And, you know, don't put anything else on my dining room table because my floral arrangement is just gorgeous, you know? So I definitely agree with that. I mean, I've definitely started looking a lot more too into candles, lavender scents and things like that, because it's something about the aromatherapy of it, the scent of it going into your body. It is
that pillow spray. Get you some lavender pillow spray. That right there is just lavender eye pillows. The lavender eye pillows are.
I have seen those. Yes, yeah. Definitely have to look into other ways. Everything doesn't have to be medicinal. You know, you can find other ways to cope. So I cannot wait for that episode. I may have to have you guest I don't know. We may have to have a little session or something. We may have to. Can we smoke on Zoom?
Well, I will say I don't do the cannabis unless I need it.
Gotcha.
And I also, I really don't like to inhale anything too much unless I need it. But there's other ways to use cannabis too. It doesn't always have to be, it could be oil. I've used cannabis for muscle pain, oils, lotions,
And I love CBD gummies just to go to sleep with. Okay. And we went off the topic. That's the for sure. We're gonna do that though. I might have to have you on that one. So we discussed that one. Let's see. I think that there were so many other ones. I think that you definitely gave me some really good information around the the mental illness and how it affects your community. And I really hope that that gets better, because it's already so much bias and stigma behind having a mental illness. And then on top of that, your community is dealing with so many other things that's just like, I couldn't imagine. I really hope that they are able to find some type of peace and some type of way to cope with everything that they're dealing with. You know what I mean? Yeah. I do want to talk about a couple of more things before I let you go. So I know I'm running out of time, but cool. So November is a very special month for the Indigenous community. So please share with us what it represents and why is it important?
So November is what we call Native American Heritage Month. Mm-hmm. You have Black History Month, and it's just been it's so amazing to see the celebrations and the carpet that gets rolled out for Black History Month, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody, and there's always been like celebrations around it. And Native American Heritage Month is essentially the same for us. We have so many different opportunities for awareness events, panel discussions, celebrations. Usually when there's not a pandemic, there's usually gathering with food and song and dance and exchanging and just prayer and just a good vibrations. You know what I'm saying? It happens literally throughout the country. And then the week, so there's a couple of days, and it's always been that. It's pretty cool. We usually have a calendar where you have one day is rock your braids, so you wear your hair in braids, so the kids will go into school like that, people will go into work like that. Next thing will be rock your mocks, rock your moccasins, and these were things that help to create the awareness, obviously, of our existence and our diversity. Mm-hmm. And we're very proud people of those things, because this is what we have left. They took everything else, right? We have our integrity. Right. You know what I'm saying? And so that's something that we wear with pride, because it's what we have. Right. So when people try to take that away from us, it's like, dude, right. You took everything. You took the land,
what else do we have to give you at this point?
Period. So that's what Native American Heritage Month really encompasses, is that celebrating part. Now, what we call the National Week of Mourn is the week of Thanksgiving. So it's really, there's a lot of educating, not always virtual, but just a lot of educating events of awareness about the truth of the things and why we mourn. So we have a week of mourn, basically, for our ancestors that, didn't make it. Now for me, I come from the Shinnecock, the Montauk, the Pequot, the Nahagonset, the Nipmuc, the Niantic, the Massachusetts, and the Wampanoag peoples, where the ships first landed, where the Mayflower essentially landed. Those are my communities. We're still there. We were not removed. We literally remained, but there was a war against the Pequots. There was a massacre that happened. And this happened essentially in October of 1636 is when it ended. And so they massacred over 700 women and children. The whole intent was to get rid of any Pequot. They wanted to get rid of the whole tribe. like the whole tribe. So a year later, there was a proclamation that was created from Governor John Winthrop in 1637. This is the first place that we see Thanksgiving on paper. People don't ever talk about this. They skip to George Abraham Lincoln immediately and talk about how he started Thanksgiving. The first place that it was on paper was through Governor John Winthrop in 1637. And he wrote a proclamation basically stating that on the 12th month in the 4th week of November, we will hold a day of public thanksgiving for the subduing of the Pequot. That is what they were giving thanks to on that day. On that day.
To massacring them, to kill
them. Yeah, that's basically, subduing. I was using old English. It's my historian side.
Real girl. Okay, that was,
But people need to know what it actually said. You know, and that was why a lot of those words we didn't know, right? Because we're not that literate in that kind of language. We need to start talking it and start being educated in these languages on these contracts that we're signing or choosing not to sign, or what was written so that we were sold on. So that's what was said. So that's the only time. So that day, Thanksgiving Day, is called for us the National Day of Mourn. Because of that. That is a day to mourn. My ancestor, my direct line, those people were massacred. Not all of them, because I'm alive, but not those people were massacred. And the ones that were left were put into slavery immediately. And in exchange, because it was in 1641, so about 4 years after that proclamation, Massachusetts Bay Colony became the first British colony in all of the colonies to actually legalize slavery. So the ship that came in was Africans, and the ship that came out were the Pequots. So the exchange was that's what happened a year after that. So, you know, there's so much more to how it got to what it is today. So I'm just like, at what point did y'all leave that part out of history? Y'all show the Pilgrims and the Indians, but you were lying about that because that's not what happened, period.
Right.
That was a cover up so that when more and more people came, they didn't feel like we were going to be hostile. It was a marketing tactic. It was, look, they're easy. We can sleep with them. We can make them our wives. We can get rid of them. And they're great Christians. They know how to make a good sandwich, whatever. You know what I'm saying? They had to water it down so that they didn't know anybody that came over seen us as hostile.
Right. Wow.
So yeah, what is the month? The month is Native American Heritage Month. It is the month of November. It's been that way. My uncles and aunts, 1970, they protested the first National Day of Mourn at Plymouth. And it wasn't, I mean, it was a peaceful, organized protest, but, you know, it was AIM, American Indian Movement, actually came out, and we have Eastern chapters in the Northeast. And that was all during, like, you know, right around the Civil Rights era and all that kind of stuff. But in 1970, that was the first official organized protest. Now, to this day, from that, it's literally every year there's a ceremony that's held in the same place that my uncles and aunts had the protest. And it's the National Day of Mourn. It happens at sunrise, and people from all around the country and the world actually come and gather, and they honor our ancestors right there in Plymouth.
Through prayer, how do you honor them? Just by being there?
A lot of that over the years has changed. Like I said, like when my aunts and uncles went there, they came strapped. You know, but now it's usually a gathering because it's multicultural people. But there's usually like an opening ceremony that has a prayer and a song. There's usually dance and words expressed from different people that have come and why they've come, and you know, and it's a really good feeling. You know, it's cold because it's on the bay of Massachusetts in November. It's freezing. But it's
Sure.
beautiful that they still have it every year, but the first year was 1970.
That's awesome. I mean, that's great information to know. You know what I mean? Because now it's like, do I celebrate Thanksgiving? Because that just sounds horrible. And
Yeah.
I just, never really knew. You just kind of go with custom or tradition and you don't even really know where it
Same with
came
me.
from. Yeah.
It really was like I think it's our generation, right, of our parents that are kind of breaking away because like our parents and grandparents, like they didn't quite. I don't want to say they didn't have a choice. They did, but it wasn't always the safest. Let's say there, it wasn't always the safest for them to do something different than the norm.
I understand that.
I'm not gonna say that you didn't have a choice, but
Right.
it wasn't always the safest for them or their family.
To
So
make
they
that
raised
choice.
their family so that you did it so that way I didn't rebel because that would be unsafe.
Yeah.
That would become safe to be able to do it. That's what we do. But we did celebrate other Thanksgivings. We had 13 of them. There's 13 different
Oh,
moons.
okay.
There's different berries that come about.
Mm-hmm.
There's different fruits that come about. There's different times of the year that are very unique to that particular time. And our
Mm-hmm.
ancestors knew that. I mean, the strawberry where we come from is the first berry of the season. We have a strawberry Thanksgiving. You
Oh,
know, it's the
okay.
first berry that comes up out of the earth in the
Mm-hmm.
northeast. Um, and we have cranberry Thanksgiving, which is around about this time because cranberries. This is the time. This is the last berry of the season.
Mm-hmm.
So there's teachings that we have around the cycle of the year, and so we celebrated these things. We always did. So, but there really wasn't anything specific about Thanksgiving Day
Right.
until they made it that way.
They made it a holiday. And now let me ask you a question around that because we are about to wrap it up.
Mhm.
I mean, so much information. I honestly feel like I don't know how much of it I was able to retain, but I want to know more, and I want to be educated. I want to understand. I want to understand why these things happened and how these affected other people, and I mean, everybody's experience is so different, and we don't really know what each other's experience is because we don't really take out time.
Yeah.
We're in an age of instant gratification. You know
Right.
what I mean? So nobody has time, but I'm going to encourage my people to make time. And so what I need from you right now, those who are interested in learning more about Chenae's community and unfortunately what they've suffered, and also to know more about what she's trying to do and how she's trying to make changes for her community so that they can have the same opportunities as everyone else. Where would you recommend someone who wants to either know more information, contribute to the cause, whether it's a book, whether it's a website? What would be your recommendation here?
Well, my first recommendation would be similar to what I said about the learning about self.
Mm-hmm.
It would be wherever you are in the country or in the world, get to know the local people, local indigenous people
Mm-hmm.
of that particular area. Because it's one thing to say, I want to help out Shinnecock, but I live in Wyoming. Well, there's a whole tribe in Wyoming that's probably trying to either stop a pipeline, stop some kind of drilling. Their elders need help. They don't have, you know what I'm saying? Like there's a whole, or they're having a whole social and they're having a car wash and they want everybody to come by. Like it's kind of great to start home. That's what I would suggest first.
Okay.
And it's very simple to kind of do that. Google's a good start, but then from there you can go there. The other part would be, I think there's tons of different organizations or coalitions or movements that are happening. Type in a couple of these hashtags. Hashtag MMIW, which is Missing Murdered Indigenous Women. Hashtag Indigenous Peoples Movement, Indigenous Peoples March, hashtag Preserve Shinnecock Hills, hashtag Land Back. These are like very well-known hashtags that are kind of universal. And from there, it'll get you to like the organization, whatever their calls to actions are, any kind of events that are happening that maybe you could just jump. Right now it's amazing. Like you could do it in the comfort of your home. I'm speaking at a panel for Harvard. In 2 weeks, I'll be speaking at Yale. I'll be speaking at NYU. And these are live events, talking about real stuff. And they're free. You can do it right in the comfort of your home. You don't have to leave anywhere. That's the awesome thing about all of this. That would be my suggestion, because everybody's got to have some kind of groundwork to do first, because the book would be overwhelming.
And so if anyone's interested in that, what I would do is I would get that information from you, Chenae, if you don't mind. And I will post that information with this episode so that they can go directly there to those links and don't even have to look for it. Just click on the link and they're there. Wow. I mean, I feel like there's so much more to know. I feel like we definitely did not have enough time. This is like a 3 or 4 hour conversation, or probably much, much, much longer. But I do want to thank you so much for taking out your time to be here. You are so busy. You are so amazing. You are so powerful. I'm so blessed to have met you.
Yes, sister.
Anything that I can do. I mean, my platform is your platform. I'm here for your community, and as much that I can be, even if it's just getting the story out there.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, first of all, for having such a platform, and to, like really, what it's turned into for you is so funny, because like when you receive all these gifts, you realize like, here, thank you, creator, but I'm supposed to be, you know what I'm saying? And that's what you're doing with your platform, because if it wasn't for platforms like this, we wouldn't even be heard.
No.
Period.
But that's so sad, right? But you know what? At the same time, that creates opportunity. So here we are, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to stand up and I'm going to say, listen, we are tired of being quiet. And it's not just Black women. It's this group of people and that group of people and this group. And we're tired. We have mental illness and we want to say we have it and we need help.
Yeah.
And it's okay. It's okay. Like we're still normal. It's okay. We don't have to be the pit of your joke because we have mental illness. You know what I mean? So I want to thank you too for even allowing your platform to support what I'm doing, because this is new for me. This is episode 3, and I'm just so blessed and honored to have someone like you to be here during my premiere, during my footprint into this world for real. You know what I mean? So I appreciate that. So listen again, guys, you want to get in contact with her. Let me make sure I give you guys the website. It is moskehtuconsulting.com. That is MOSKEHTU consulting.com. Again, you will find that in the notes. I will also provide any contact information that she wants to provide you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I want to thank Chenae Bullock for joining me. And listen, guys, make sure you check on your strong friends. We need help too. Check on your strong friends. Have a good evening.